So I'm Kati, and I work at VTT at our in-house design team. And most of you may know this, but VTT is Finland's technical research centre, and our mission is to address the biggest global challenges through science and technology innovation. And when we're working on these new technologies, what's really important for our design team is that to ensure that we create innovations that aren't just the good old desirable, viable, and feasible, but that they are actually responsible as well. And with responsible, I mean that we don't just want to minimize harms, but we want to ensure throughout the project that we actually create maximum societal and ecological impact. And in practice, we do this by drawing from various different fields of research and design. So in our design team, we have, for example, very deep expertise in futures design and sustainability transitions. And one of the craft areas where we've recently gained more experience in is systems thinking. And today I'm going to tell you about a project where we took this systems-led approach and used systems modeling to make sense of the problem space. And the project that I'm going to tell more about, it's VTT's internal innovation project that focuses on packaging. And as we all know, single-use packaging is very common in Finland these days. We see it everywhere, we interact with it daily. And in the beginning of the project, we digged quite deep into some Eurostat statistics, and we actually learned that in Finland in 2020, each Finnish resident generated an average of 157 kilos of packaging waste. And that number is huge, but also the worst news is that it's increasing every year. And in a perfect situation, all of this packaging waste, it could be recycled into new raw material. But unfortunately, our recycling system, as it is now, it is far from perfect. So especially plastic packaging waste is quite problematic because a significant amount of that is incinerated. And when it comes to paper-based packaging, the situation is slightly better. The material recovery rate of cardboard and paper is higher, but still those materials can only be recycled a handful of times before they lose their quality. So basically, this is a very, very long-winded way of saying that to produce the single-use packaging that we need today, we need to extract new virgin materials. And as we know, extraction of virgin materials, it can accelerate then. Yes. Technology. Yeah, sorry about that. Before the mic literally dropped, I think I was starting to get into a rant about deforestation and loss of biodiversity. But yeah, it's not like the use of virgin materials. It's not the only issue when it comes to single-use packaging. We also know that throughout its life cycle, a single-use package, it creates greenhouse gas emissions in various stages. And also packaging, it can contribute to the pollution of air, land, and sea. So just in addition to this pure ecological impact, what our team often talks about is also how single-use packaging, how it's almost like the epitome or the symbol of today's fast consumption culture. Because when you think about it, it's quite crazy. We've become very normal with the idea that, okay, we can just, let's say, buy takeaway food, eat it, and then just discard the package like 10 minutes later or something. So it's accentuating a throwaway mindset. So one solution to these sad problems could be reusable packaging. And with reusable packaging, I mean, for example, a takeaway coffee cup that is used by several people and then just sanitized between use. And there are solutions like this already in the market, but they are often quite small in scale and also mainly focusing on the takeaway food sector. So as a starting point, our project team was asking, like, okay, what would it look like if these reuse solutions, if they were scaled? What if we would, for example, get our groceries in reusable packaging or our hygiene products, et cetera, et cetera. And also, if these reusable packages, if they were adopted at scale, what would be the environmental impact? Would it alleviate the pressure on planetary boundaries? And I remember in the beginning of the project, I thought that, okay, this is quite cool. What we could do is try to understand what the current user experience of using these reusable packages looks like. We could interview different stakeholders, et cetera, and then try to ideate improvements against those insights. But spoiler alert, we didn't go for this quite linear approach in the end. Some of you may have heard this, but VTT's slogan is beyond the obvious. And as this was VTT's internal innovation project, we also really wanted to make sure that we go beyond the usual thinking and beyond the technical focus where we only think about technology. So our project team, we started asking ourselves, like, okay, if we just swap one technology for another, so in this case, single-use packaging to reusable packaging, but don't address any of the underlying incentives or goals or paradigms of the system, will we actually just end up with the same problems in the end, or shift the problem from one planetary boundary to another? Which is actually a very hot topic in the packaging industry at the moment, as people are thinking about, like, okay, reusable packaging, it sounds promising, but it could also result in increased water usage and maybe even increased greenhouse gas emissions, depending on the backstage logistics. So we realized that before we think about solutions, we need to make sure that we understand the system holistically. And to do this, we actually sought help from VTT's in-house system dynamics team. And as the first step, our system dynamics expert, they asked us to define what are the boundaries of the system that you're interested in. And in our case, it was Finland, it was primary and secondary packaging of consumer products, and it was all packaging materials. And once we had defined the boundaries, we had a workshop for our internal project team. And in our project team, there's approximately 15 researchers from VTT who all have expert knowledge in packaging, but from slightly different points of view. So in our team, we have people who they know heaps about packaging legislation. We have people who specialize in impact assessments. We have people who are really deep into materials or supply chains, et cetera, et cetera. So we wanted to invite all of these people into the same room so that we could try to map out the system and create a shared understanding of how these different elements in the system, first of all, what are they? And second of all, how are all of those connected to one another, so that we could spot root causes and then also realize what the impacts are. So in the workshop, we created a first draft of our systems map, and we iterated it in some small groups later on, and then ended up with this final systems model. So it looks a little bit like spaghetti, but it depicts the single-use packaging system as it is now. And here we have the other side of the coin. So here we have the reusable packaging system. And here in the map, we have different elements that play a role in the system. So we have elements that are, for example, related to regulation. We have elements that are related to ecological impact. We have elements that are related to cost and convenience of packaging, and also to mindset and values. And we can also see in the model like how these different elements are connected. And we can also see how a change into one of these elements would then change the other elements. So let's say if, for example, the convenience of reusable packaging, if it increases, from the model we can see then how the rest of the system changes. Do the other variables, do they increase or do they decrease? And the aim of all of this then is to find out those feedback loops. So some of those feedback loops, they are balancing in nature, whereas others, they're reinforcing, which means that if a variable in that feedback loop changes, then it kickstarts this snowball effect where the other variable starts changing in the same direction as well. And really the aim of this as well is to then identify leverage points. So where in the system should we intervene to kickstart this positive change that we want to see? And if I'm totally honest, it was quite difficult to then spot what are the most powerful leverage points. I think if you were very experienced systems thinker, it would come with experience. But in our case, we concluded that there are actually several leverage points where we should focus on. So we had leverage points that are related to policy and regulation. We had other leverage points that are related to mindset and values. And we had leverage points that are related to just infrastructure and supply chains, for example. And I wanted to finish this talk with just some reflections about systems modeling. And I think that it is a very good way to create shared understanding in a group that has diverse points of view, and to ensure that the rest or the whole team has a chance to offer their individual points of view. And I mentioned that we did the models with our internal project team, and I think if we invited even a more diverse group of people, so for example, policymakers and company representatives and then environmental activists all to the same room, it could have been an even more powerful discussion. But even though we didn't, it still unlocked quite many new things for me. And one of the things that this holistic approach really highlighted is how locked in we are actually to the existing system. And I know that it's not a positive thing to say, and I was even thinking, like, can I say it in this event? But it was just a really powerful insight for me because like past investments to, for example, machinery and infrastructure, they have actually created this single-use packaging system that is extremely cost efficient and convenient. And by doing this modeling, our team realized that if we really want to change the system, like it's almost impossible to beat the single-use packaging system in cost efficiency and convenience. So we should find other levers where to pull. And we should actually think a lot more radically. We should think about changes to value chains and supply chains and like how goods in general are produced and sold. And also we should think about what kind of interventions can we do to impact people's mindsets and values. So yeah, as a summary, the modeling, it really gave me a more, I would say, realistic understanding of the transition efforts and what the transition pathway could look like. And the last thing I wanted to touch on are rebound effects. So at VTT, when we are working with these new, quite innovative technologies sometimes, it's always important for us to think about what are the unintentional consequences of these technologies as well. And the systems modeling it turned out to be a really effective way to visualize and then also discuss those rebound effects. Because our system work, it also showed that Yeah, reusable packaging, it seems promising, but it could also be used for greenwashing purposes if only packages are changed, but we still then keep producing and selling and consuming unsustainable goods at an ever-increasing rate. And as this has been a very short talk, I've very much been focusing on systems thinking and systems modeling here, but in reality, it has been just a short phase in the project. And actually, the project is still ongoing, but we are just in a different stage at the moment. So at the moment, we are thinking about the future and what everyday life could look like in 2040. And we are asking this question, like, if society, if it adopted this resource-wise mindset, where people really start connecting with nature and appreciating nature's resources, how would that then impact life? How would that then impact how we consume goods? And finally, what would the role of packaging be in a society like this? And what we're aiming to do is to create this experiential prototype or an exhibition that a person can step into and then experience what the future could look like. And we're planning to do this and then take the prototype to different locations and test it with different groups of stakeholders. So in case you're interested to learn more about this, come and talk to me after the official part of these presentations end. Thank you for having me, and thank you for listening.